World War II, known as the deadliest military event in history, with an approximate 60 million deaths, is definitely one of the darkest episodes in the history of humanity. In this, the main military powers of the time faced each other, aligned in two sides. The Allies, mainly made up of the United Kingdom, France, the Soviet Union, and later the United States, and the Axis, made up of Nazi Germany, Italy, and the Empire of Japan. The war mainly took place in two scenarios: Europe and Asia Pacific. In this video, we will talk about the front where the war exploded Europe. But before we review, what were the factors that led to detonate this bloody war? In 1918, the First World War ended, in which one of the losers, Germany, was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles, through which it lost much of its territory, gave up most of its colonies, was imposed heavy economic sanctions, and was even branded as the big villain of the movie. But what a humiliation, right? This generated a general discontent of the population, which came hand in hand with the rise to power of the controversial and well-known leader Adolf Hitler, who in the years prior to the war took care of exterminating all political opposition on the Night of the Long Knives in 1934, and proclaimed unification with Austria through the Anschluss in 1938. Hitler's regime was characterized by the spread of extreme nationalism, single-party rule, anti-communism, the idea of expanding German territory, and also a feeling of anti-Semitism that was reflected in a gradual repression of Jews in the 1930s, which included the destruction of their businesses. On the other hand, a regime of fascist ideology had been established in Italy with the rise of Benito Mussolini to power. Being a regime similar to Hitler's, they thus became allies of Nazism. But why would Italy change sides when it was on the Allied side in the First World War? Well, just like their new friends, Italy was also not satisfied with the Treaty of Versailles, where they did not grant Italy all the promised territories. And on their part, what were the Allies doing? In the face of the growing political and armament power of Nazi Germany, they showed a policy of appeasement, guided by the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain. And this was reflected in the Munich Agreement, in which Germany would incorporate the Sudeten region of Czechoslovakia without even the participation of the latter, alleging that the population of this region was mostly German. To start the tensions, in March 1939, Hitler breaks the agreements of the Munich Treaty and takes not only the Sudetenland, but the rest of the country, thus creating the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia and the puppet state of Slovakia. This demonstrated the failure of appeasement. Not being enough, Hitler now demanded the city of Danzig from Poland, lost in the Treaty of Versailles. So in May, Poland signed a mutual defense agreement with France and the United Kingdom. For its part, Germany signed the Ribbentrop-Molotov non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union in August, in which they even agreed to divide Poland and other territories. In addition, both powers would divide Central Europe into spheres of influence. With all this, the war begins on September 1, 1939, when Germany invades Poland. In response, the first to declare war on Germany is the United Kingdom and its allies, quickly followed by France. Days later, the Soviet Union also invades Poland from the east, both campaigns being successful and leaving Poland completely occupied. This was followed by a period called the Phoney War, during the winter between 1939 and 1940, where the Allies maintained the defensive through the Maginot Line, a defense wall along the border between France and Germany, but no significant combat occurred. During this period, the Soviet Union goes to war with Finland, in which despite the Red Army outnumbering the Finnish 4-1, it proved very difficult to impose, and they did not achieve a complete invasion. In the end, they could only annex small territories, and this left a precedent of weakness, which was perceived by Hitler. In April, 1940 Operation Westerbund begins, in which Hitler invades the neutrals of Denmark and Norway, who did not offer much resistance despite Allied support. This was a strategic victory for Hitler, as he used Norway as a base for naval and air attacks, as well as obtaining supply points for resources that would support the continued production of more weaponry. The Phoney War ends in May 1940 when Germany invades Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Another successful operation, thanks to the Blitzkrieg tactic, or Lightning War, consisted of bombing cities and quickly invading the enemy so that they do not have time to react. During the invasion of France, the famous miracle of Dunkirk stands out, whereby, having been cornered by German troops, 330,000 Allied soldiers managed to escape to England. The reason why Germany let that happen? The topic still sparks debate today. On June 22, 1940, in the face of the Axis's constant victories, France signed an armistice with Germany, dividing French territory into two: the northern zone, occupied by Germany, and the southern state, known as Vichy France. Vichy would be a new German puppet state under the command of Philippe Pétain. On the other hand, Germany's main ally, Italy, had also declared war on the Allies, and for its part took some territories in Africa, Albania, and Greece, who put up a resistance that puts Italy in a tight spot. Another battleground in the war is the Mediterranean Sea. The German objective was to reach the Suez Canal, as this blockade would make it difficult for support to arrive from India and Australia. With the French surrender, the United Kingdom attacks the Vichy French fleet in Algeria on July 3, 1940, for fear that it would fall into German hands. Hitler, back at the Western Front, began strategizing the invasion of England, already led by Winston Churchill. To do this, they sought air superiority during the Battle of Britain, between July and November. Not achieving the expected results, this is considered the first German defeat. So Hitler deployed various bombings over these 5 months to the main cities of England. Despite this, London resisted and did not yield to the German invasion. In September 1940, Italy launched an offensive in Egypt to continue attacking British bases in their colonies. With this, the North Africa campaign begins, where the Allies have the support of Australia and New Zealand, and together they counterattack in Operation Compass. For its part, Italy receives German support with the well-known Africa Corps, under the command of General Erwin Rommel. Faced with this need, the Germans begin to see the Allies as a burden. In April 1941, the Axis forces, who were also joined by the kingdoms of Hungary and Bulgaria, invade Yugoslavia. In addition, a new puppet state of the Axis is proclaimed, the state of Croatia. The rest of the territory was divided among the invaders. These events, coupled with the invasion of Greece, delayed one of Hitler's most unexpected plans, the invasion of the Soviet Union through Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941. Something even Stalin didn't anticipate. The initial goal was to capture Leningrad. While this offensive initially caused several casualties and the loss of large expanses of territory in a short time, as Germany came to occupy the Baltic countries, Belarus, Ukraine, and part of Russia, reaching its maximum expansion at this point, everything changed with the arrival of the winter in December, and with this, the beginning of the adventures of a hasty Hitler who dared to open the war on two fronts. The United States joined the war following the Pearl Harbor attack in December 1941. With this, a new war front opens in the Pacific Ocean, a front that we will see in more detail in another video. But what matters to us is that with this, President Franklin Roosevelt declares war on Japan, allied with Germany. So Hitler, still confident and proud, declares war on the United States. And with this, he would thus sentence the fate of the Axis to a future defeat. Now, with a new rival on the table, Germany, who had taken control of the North Atlantic with their U-boats, submarines with which they had sunk a large number of Allied ships, also began to sink American ships. In May 1942, a Royal Navy destroyer captured a German submersible obtaining the Enigma machine, with which they were able to decipher the code used by the U-boats, thus obtaining the information of the movements of the German ships. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the cold winter had prevented the Germans from continuing to advance. In January 1942, Stalin ordered a counteroffensive. Although the Germans achieved some more victories, such as in the Second Battle of Kharkov, defeats began to appear. Between August 1942 and February 1943, the bloodiest battle in history, the Battle of Stalingrad, was fought, in which more than 2 million people, both civilians and military, lost their lives. With this begins the decline of the advance of the German armies, and after this, there would be no new victory for Hitler on the Eastern Front. In May 1943, returning to the Mediterranean, the Axis forces surrendered in Tunisia, and the Allies took Sicily in July. With this event, Mussolini's regime collapses, being ousted by Pietro Badoglio, who vindicated himself before the Allied invasion of mainland Italy on September 3, 1943. After this, Mussolini was rescued by order of Hitler, who created a new puppet government known as the Italian Social Republic, splitting the territory in two and starting the Italian Civil War or Italian Campaign, in which each faction was supported by one of the two sides. This would end with an Allied victory. On the Eastern Front, following the Stalingrad triumph, the Soviet Union steadily reclaimed its occupied lands. Between June and August 1944, through Operation Bagration, the German troops in Belarus and the Baltic countries were finally expelled, which meant the total failure of Operation Barbarossa. During this same period, Germany's decline on the Western Front also begins. On June 6, 1944, on the famous D-Day, the Battle of Normandy begins, through which the Allies, now with the support of the United States and Canada, enter France to liberate it from the Germans. This Allied victory is considered the largest maritime invasion in history. After this, a provisional government of France was created under the command of Charles de Gaulle. Hitler's defeats continued in the Battle of the Bulge between December 1944 and January 1945, where Germany tried to launch an offensive from the Ardennes forests in Belgium, which was rejected by the Allies, who already considerably outnumbered the German troops. In response to this, Hitler continued to lose more territories, and his defeat became increasingly imminent. But Germany's final blow was between April and May 1945, with the battles of Berlin and Prague, where the allies of the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union and Poland, to which even some former Axis partners such as Romania joined, ended with the invasion of Berlin and the liberation of the last occupied territories of the East. During this invasion, Mussolini would be shot in Italy and Hitler would commit suicide. Stop there for a moment. As many know, there are theories that Hitler escaped to Argentina in a U-boot, so I leave this part open to either of the two options. This would mean the end of the war in Europe, after which the agreement between the Allies at the Yalta Conference shortly before the end of the war in Europe would be fulfilled. In this, the occupation and demilitarization of Germany would be decided, as well as the loss of much of its territory. This would be the beginning of the Cold War in the face of the rise of the Soviet Union and the United States as superpowers, and would drive the creation of new intergovernmental societies like the UN and the European Union, with the hope that a bloody war like this, which left most European nations devastated, will not happen again.